Hello, everybody, and welcome. I just want to start today by acknowledging that I'm coming to you from the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I want to acknowledge their elders past, present, and emerging. Today is a very exciting day for us at Celebrate Aging. We are formally launching our Centre for Intergenerational Practice. And for those of you to go back a step who don't know us, Celebrate Aging is a charity. For the last 10 years, we've been combating ageism and building respect for older Australians. The work we do is really quite unique. We look at bridging the evidence to culture gap using really innovative art and narrative-based approaches. And the Centre for Intergenerational Practice is quite a natural fit for us. And what we would like to do today is share with you some of the projects that we've been doing over the last 10 years, and then share with you some reflections on what we've learned about intergenerational practice from that 10 years of work. Then what I'll be doing is launching Gen K, or Generational Kindness, which is our workshops focused on combating ageism and building stronger communities, one act of kindness at a time. I will be joined by June Lowe, one of the directors of Celebrate Aging, who co-developed the resource. June will share her critique of why Gen K matters. And then we'll hear from Yumi Lee, who is the CEO of the Older Women's Network of New South Wales. And they were one of our pilot sites. And Katie Kavanagh will be joining us, who facilitated the workshops for the Older Women's Network. Katie has with her today, we're delighted to say, Norma, who was one of the participants, and Norma's younger counterpart, Jamie, has shared a film with us. So after we've done that and shared reflections on Gen K, what we'll then do is tell you about the Gen K network, or the Gen K Leadership Network, which is our offering to people who are interested in intergenerational workshops and collaborations. So I guess to start off with, what we would like to do, as I said, is to share with you some of the projects that we have been doing over the last 10 years. And some of those projects have focused specifically on people living with dementia. Others have focused on LGBTI communities, and some of them on the community more broadly. I'd like to also acknowledge Sarah Liversidge, one of our directors, as well as June Lowe, one of our directors that are here today. And thank you, Sarah, for your help with the technology. If you go to the next slide, thanks, Sarah. So our work, intergenerational projects with people living with dementia. Some of you may be aware of the Museum of Love, which is our work humanising the experiences of people living with dementia. And one of our intergenerational projects is called The Kiss, and June will recognise these portraits from Lovefest in Perth. And this project looked at portraits of older people and of people living with dementia and the people they love as a way of humanising their experiences. Thanks, Sarah. The next slide is a project that is really starting to change and shape and build now, and it's called Small Acts of Love. And this again is from Lovefest in Perth, which June co-led. And part of that work was about understanding the importance of love in the lives of people living with dementia. So we invited people living with dementia, their families and friends, to tell us what love means to them, and also to tell us what dementia makes more difficult in relationships, and particularly what it is that they do to get around those difficulties in relationships. And they are the small acts of love. And so what we did at Lovefest in Perth was we put little messages up on helium balloons and around the festival venue. And this is some work that's really emerging as incredibly important, and we're really looking forward to expanding on this one. Thanks, Sarah. One of our most recently released projects is called Turbulence, and this was a queer project that looked at older LGBTIQ+, if I can use the term queer for the moment. So older queer people's experiences of difficulties as they age. So much of the work that we've done has focused on issues related to queerphobia, I think. And what we wanted to do was just to look at the normal difficulties relating to aging. So living with dementia, dialysis, diabetes, all the things that can be difficult, and how intergenerational connection help people through. And we made a series of 5 really beautiful 5-minute films where older people and younger people shared their relationship and what it meant to them. And then we shared those with the community and asked them to write reviews for us as a way of engaging people in understanding the content of those important films. Thanks, Sarah. The next one. Abundance is the project we need right now. We set this up a number of years ago, and as happens with so many of our projects, what we did was initially a project with older people and then realised the potential to bring younger people in and really expand. And this project was about older trans and gender diverse people, and it followed on from a project that I worked on in my academic pre-celebrate aging life, where we looked at older trans and gender diverse people's experiences of aging, and there was so much bad news relating to transphobia. And what we did was we said, let's set up a story pantry and let's make preserves as a kind of a metaphor for what are the things that older trans and gender diverse people might bottle that is good about their lives. What is it that you would put in a bottle and you'd share it with someone else and say, this is something really hopeful for you. So we then did those workshops, repeated those workshops with younger trans and gender diverse people. And there are a beautiful series of portraits of trans and gender diverse people and their preserves and what that jar of preserve meant to them, and a gorgeous film from that. But, it's a project we very much need right now. Thanks, Sarah. Never a Crime was one of the projects that followed on from Premier Daniel Andrews in Victoria did an apology to queer community, or particularly gay and bisexual men, for the laws that shamed and stigmatised and created really, quite a lot of damage. And we were really interested in that concept that the laws have changed, but there are still those legacies of shame, and that pride is the opposite of shame, and how could we explore the shame and build pride. So we did some mask making workshops, and here's a picture of one of the masks, and we did those for older gay men to start off with, and our oldest participant was a 96-year-old gay man, and then we got some more funding and we expanded them to include younger people as well too, and including trans and gender diverse folk, queer folk, lesbians. And it was really quite a powerful process to have a 96-year-old and a 26-year-old comparing notes and realising how much has changed in the world, but still that felt sense of shame and stigma is there, and how can we do work that protects ourselves from that. So really quite a beautiful project. Thanks, Sarah. Runway 6 is for those of you who in pre-COVID days were able to come to our Embolden festivals, where we brought older people and service providers together to look at ways of combating ageism and building respect for older people. The highlight of those events was the catwalk, the fashion parade at the end of that event. And we call this Catwalks Against Ageism, and the models, all first-time models of all shapes and sizes and abilities and colours and sexualities and genders, beautifully walking down the runway, being proud of themselves. And we call this their catwalk attitude. So the things that they say to themselves about who they are that allow them to be a model for the first time and not be thinking, what are other people thinking about me? Just knowing ourselves, I am beautiful, I am having this experience, I don't need to be affirmed by others, this is my experience. And one of the really beautiful moments there was Duncan McManus, who is a fabulous designer and a member of queer community, designed outfits for older LGBTI people who came down the runway. And here's David. He's a 92-year-old gay man, and really, really beautiful project. And I'd encourage you to get on the website and have a look at the films we produced from that. Thanks, Sarah. Kitchen Table is a collaboration with Elder Rights Advocacy in Victoria, and what we did was put an invitation out to photographers in Victoria to capture some family portraits that demonstrate respect for older people. And there were stories that went alongside all of these portraits, and they were stories of the respect for older people in households, and I guess symbolically thinking about what we learn about generations at the kitchen table. A really beautiful project, and Kathy Ronalds is the photographer here. Just, you know, incredibly gorgeous photographs. Thanks, Sarah. Becoming was a collaboration with Raucous Theatre. Raucous Theatre works with artists who have a disability, and they invited us to collaborate on an exploration of the sense of becoming that can happen with age. And this was a really beautiful project as well. Thanks, Sarah. A collaboration with the Older Women's Network of New South Wales. We share a passion for addressing the ageism and sexism and ableism that older women experience. So one of the things that we did, Yumi and I conspired on this one, was a campaign for International Women's Day called My Grandmother. And we reached out to community members and we said, we wanted them to think about what our grandmothers had taught us, or older women in our lives that have taught us something. And we wanted to help people to remember to value older women. And if you have a look at that webpage, it's full of the most beautifully diverse and heartwarming stories. And we've followed that up this year with a campaign called Older Women Count. The revolution has a long way to go, but love being on the journey with you, Yumi, and the Older Women's Network. Thanks, Sarah. The last project that I want to share with you, and you'll see many more of them on our website, was Squads, or Storytelling Queers Against Discrimination. And this was kind of an accidental project, or it started, it was Melbourne lockdown, connecting older LGBTI people with community. And one of the things that we said that we would do was write some intergenerational pride fairy tales. So focusing on something beautifully positive during COVID lockdown. And we realised that it would be wonderful to bring older people, older queer folk and younger queer folk together to write the fairy tales together. And in the process of writing those fairy tales, we were drawing on the real life experiences of older and younger folk. And in this case, this was a story that was called The Roar. And it was a story about dinosaur pride. And it followed the real life story of Celosaurus Rex, who's here today. And I'd like to acknowledge you, Sal Conning, and Jaosaurus. And I'd like to acknowledge Merrin Wade, Jaosaurus's Mamasaurus, here today. So it was a story about dinosaurs, but it was a story about pride. It was a very real story. And so we wrote the story and we gave it a happy ending. But at the end of that story, we realised the happy ending that we gave to Jaxosaurus, who was 12 at the time, wasn't true in real life. Jaxosaurus was being bullied at school, and that didn't sit well. So what we decided to do was to bring in allies to help Jaxosaurus with what Jaxosaurus was experiencing. We brought in allies and we said to them, help us finish this story, help us give this story a happy ending. And so they all wrote happy endings, and we had an MP, we had a police officer, we had a school principal, we had, you know, healthcare workers and family friends and family members, and they all wrote a happy ending to this fairy tale. And then we said to them, now we want you to make this happy ending come true in real life. And they did that. And so there are two versions of this is an animation. There are two versions of it, and we invite you to watch both of them. One of them finishes, the animation is really the story with a happy ending, and then there's a second one that brings in all those squad members and says, tell us your reflections on this process. And it's really quite an incredibly powerful process. And what we want to do is share with you 5 minutes of this animation now. Thanks, Sarah.
Land not very far away. Once upon a time in a beige land, not very far away, there lived a herd of dinosaurs who had forgotten how to roar. Well, they hadn't exactly forgotten, they'd just stopped. No one quite knew why they stopped. Some said it was because of an ancient Stegosaurus ruler with migraines who had forbidden noise and colour and dance. The land was ruled by a Stegosaurus royal family. The royals had beige markings on their bodies, bony spikes on their spines, and tiny crowns on their heads. They asserted their authority by bluff and flocks of pterodactyl who hid behind the clouds and threw lightning bolts at anyone who dared to break their rules. In this land of beige silence, there lived a feisty dinosaur called Celosaurus rex. Celosaurus balked at beige, and the older she got, the more she balked. She didn't care about Stegosaurus power, and she was tired of the silence. On her 65th birthday, she announced to her family that she would be silent no more. It was her time to roar. And so Celosaurus began to roar. At first, she roared in front of a bathroom mirror. Then she roared in a garden while she was drinking tea. She roared in the bank, in the supermarket, the petrol station, and the hardware shop. Each time she roared, she grew louder and prouder. Also got brighter, starting with her legs, which changed from beige stripes to blue, pink, and white. The roar was reported to the royal family, who sent a platoon of soldiers to restore silence. As the army approached her house, Celosaurus walked into the street, stood up on her back legs and roared as loudly as she could. As she let out her mighty sound, windows shattered, dogs howled, buildings crumbled, and the army fled. On that day, history was made. Within hours, the roar could be heard coming from houses in every street in the land. The sound was timid and without harmony at first, and then it became louder and prouder. As the roar grew, the sun appeared and dinosaurs began to dance in the streets, holding their smiling faces up to the sun. And so the land was once very silent, and beige is now very loud and joyous and bright. The Stegosaurus royal family watched carefully and began to appreciate the importance of colour and diversity, so much so that they appointed a Comissiosaurus to travel the land and promote dinosaur equality. The Comissiosaurus was given special powers and a cute little crown. Celosaurus joined Comissiosaurus, travelling from town to town with a troupe of musicians whose job it was to help dinosaurs find their musical key. They handed out campaign flags with messages like J'adore le roar and Let's get loud and dinosaur proud. As they travelled, other dinosaurs began to join in, and some painted messages of support on their bony back spikes. One day, as they arrived in a small town, they were greeted by a shy young Triceratops called Jaxosaurus, who told them he wanted to find his roar. Jaxosaurus had travelled to meet them with his Mamasaurus, Papasaurus, and sisters Imisaurus and Kaiasaurus. His family loved him dearly and knew that he would be stronger if he could find his roar.
Jaxosaurus was a special dinosaur with a smile that lit up the night sky. He was an artist, a dreamer, a surfer, and a skatey kid. He had a pet meerkat called Harley, and he dreamed of Dinoversity being able to roar. His bedroom walls are plastered with art about kindness for all dinosaurs. But sometimes Jaxosaurus lost his smile. Mostly this happened when he was at school and the Stegosaurus kids made fun of him because he didn't have beige spots or bony spikes on his back. Being teased made him feel sad. He knew that if he could roar, it wouldn't hurt him so much when they made fun of him. He knew the roar would be his superpower. Salosaurus worked with Jaxosaurus to find his roar. They practiced night and day until they were hoarse. The more they practiced, the louder they became, until one day their sound waves were so powerful that they bounced together and were transformed into beautiful prisms of colour that flew across the sky. It was his 12th birthday and Jaxosaurus had found his roar.
Thanks, Sarah. This is such, I'm sure you'll agree, this is such a beautiful film. And thanks again to Celosaurus and Jaxosaurus's mum, Maren, who's here today as well. The film really reflects the real life experiences and was really quite cathartic in terms of building support for Jaxosaurus. But Celosaurus would tell you as well too in terms of her sense of pride and in her colours as well. So we're currently and have been since we produced the animations looking for funding to roll this out as a strategy to promote mental wellbeing and resilience in queer communities, particularly for older LGBTI people, but for queer folk of all ages who are doing it tough. So that's really a snapshot of some of the intergenerational projects that we've facilitated over the last 10 years. And I wanted to share with you some of the insights from those, what it is that we have learned. And I think the first one that's a really interesting and quite special insight for us is that so much of what we did in terms of intergenerational work was intuitive. We didn't set out to do an intergenerational process. It was really, our work is primarily with older people, and we so often recognise that to create the change we wanted to create, we needed to bring younger people in with us. And I think that's a really powerful insight. I think it says so much about intergenerational work as being the way of the world, if you like. One of the other insights that we've had is about, I think the future is multi-generational. So often when we think about intergenerational, we think about older people in residential aged care and young children. But what we found with our projects is quite often it's the generations in between. So people who are not yet old, who might be middle-aged or mature, that want to participate and can make a real difference as well. So I think the future is multi-generational. The reciprocity across the project varies, and we know from the research they talk about mutual exchange or reciprocity, that it's about give and take rather than doing to an older person or to a younger person. And what we found was the reciprocity varied across all of those projects, and that's okay. The My Grandmother campaign was about inviting younger people to share a story about an older woman who had taught them something. It was appropriate then to have that one-way exchange, if you like, and then at other times it's much more two ways and there is much more contact. So I don't think there's a formula as such. We've noticed that education accelerates change, that bringing people in generations together is something that just about everybody enjoys. But we want to create real culture change, and to do that, what we recognise is that bringing in an educational element just really opens people's minds and hearts in a different way. The next insight is about power, and some of you may be interested in why we call this the Centre for Intergenerational Power rather than the Centre for Intergenerational Collaboration. And what we are interested in is bringing older and younger people together primarily for the purposes of addressing or combating the ageism that older people experience. But we are also very interested in creating a better world for, in every possible way. And what we notice is that so often people think that they can't make a difference. But we think even small steps, 100 small steps, 1,000 small steps, 1,000,000 small steps is a revolution. And so understanding the power we all have to lead, to make a difference. And then when we bring older people and younger people together, if they have fun, that's a bonus. It's essential, actually. People have to have fun to want to be involved. But then to do something for somebody else is, I think, what really makes this powerful. And you'll hear that when Norma speaks a little bit later on. Evidence and evaluation matters by, doing our critiques of the evidence and evaluating our projects. We're learning so much about what it is that we need to do better, and that's been fantastic. And the other thing that we've learned as well too is that a lot of people want to undertake intergenerational projects and they don't necessarily know how. And so we think guidelines or giving people, sharing information with others is a really important thing to do. And so that's why today we'll be launching the Gen K Leadership Network, and we're really incredibly proud of that. But what we want to do now is we want to share with you this very new and very gorgeous project that is called Gen K. And there's a picture of Norma and Jamie, who are two of the participants of the pilot in New South Wales, and you'll be hearing from both of them shortly. But I wanted to say a few words about Gen K and where it comes from. So, as I said before, Celebrate Ageing is focused on combating ageism and building respect for older people. But something else happened on the 14th of February 2020. And for those of you who don't know the story, in a nutshell, what we did was we set up a Facebook group. So on the 14th of March at 7:30 p.m, I set up a Facebook group called The Kindness Pandemic. And it was that time in COVID, particularly for Victoria, but I know other states and territories as well, when coronavirus was really hitting. We were going into a lockdown. A lot of people were scared. There were fights in supermarkets over toilet paper. And people were calling for more acts of kindness, but we weren't actually seeing them on social media or in the news. And I thought there's that idea that where attention goes, energy flows. Let's focus on kindness as a way of trying to build it. So I set up this group. I invited 100 of my friends to join. And the next morning, there were 1,000 people. And then it started growing at a rate of, believe it or not, 50,000 people a day. And it grew to almost 580,000 people in 2 weeks. It became the fastest growing Facebook group in the world. And we were, the next year, we were voted the most uplifting Facebook group in the world. And that was a project that wasn't just focused on older people, but we were very concerned about what older people were experiencing. We wanted to just encourage kindness. And one of the really interesting things about this group is that people have said to us that being part of that group is really quite important for their mental well-being. And so we did a survey of the group, and we found that 85% of the members of our group said being part of the group improved their mental well-being. And when we asked them why, they said things like, I feel like it's going to be all right because people have got my back, or there's no us and them, there's only us. And so they are really important insights about the importance of kindness in our lives. And when I say kindness, we don't mean t-shirts and coffee cups. We mean acts of kindness that have an impact and help to change the world. And so all of that incredible work was with a team of just a dozen volunteers. And I want to acknowledge Melissa Williams, who's here with us now, who's a really important part of that team. And I think Merrin Wake, you're here as well too, and acknowledging your contributions in, how do you manage 50,000 new members a day? But we did. So we had this amazing group focused on kindness, and we had a passion for older people. And we thought, we really want to bring these two worlds together, because we see combating ageism as an act of kindness. We think if people could be more compassionate, which is another way of saying kindness, if you like, that if they could be more compassionate, they would be less ageist. And so we wanted to bring older and younger people together to undertake acts of kindness and learn about each other and combat ageism. But then when we wanted to move past this idea of older people and younger people coming together to have a good time, incredibly important. But we also think that an older person, younger person coming together will have shared passions. And if they focus on those shared passions, you know, we can relieve the kind of awkwardness that some people have meeting each other for the first time. We can build a much stronger bond, and they can be united on, you know, undertaking a very small act of kindness for someone in their local community. And that can really build people's connections with their local community. So that's what we did. And we piloted last year, including with the Older Women's Network of New South Wales. And it is such a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful process. And when we started talking to other people about it, we knew that what we wanted to do was to create a facilitator's guide or some process where we could share this with others so that they could pick this up and roll it out in their local communities. It's very much about local, and that's the Gen K. That's the Gen K Leadership Network. And we love this concept of Gen K because so often we see generational tags like boomers and millennials and Gen Xers and Ys and alphas. They're used as slurs to divide. And we just say that's not okay. Gen K is an all ages generation where we're bringing older people and younger people together to combat ageism. That's the first act of kindness. Combat the ageism, especially the ageism older people experience, but younger people experience ageism too. Let's look at that commonality and say, let us not judge somebody's merit solely on the basis of their age. And then let's turn our focus to the community and an act of kindness for someone in our local community. So that's what we did. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to invite June Lowe, who's one of our directors at Celebrate Aging. And June is also one of the people who co-designed the Gen K Leadership Network concept and the facilitator guide. And I think June and I, one of the things that I love about June is she brings a really healthy critique in. And when we first, if June doesn't mind me saying, when we first talked about Gen K and whether June was interested in being involved, she was a little cynical about it. And that brought the most wonderful critique in to us trying to really justify why a kindness approach was important. So thanks, June.
All right, I remember to unmute. Good afternoon, everybody, from Perth, WA, and on what in our country. And first of all, I pay my respects to their elders and First Nations people, where everybody else is. Also to all the activists and all the people who are on the line at the moment, who provided nurture in the past and brought values and concepts and that changing narrative that we have in our social world, and acknowledge that whatever we do, we pick up on the people who've passed the baton to us from before. And Catherine, thank you to you. Honey, what do you do in your spare time? What a crazy amount of work you put out. So thank you for organising the launch. Just as a matter of context, if you can bear with me for a sentence, I think, I first met Catherine, I think 2013 or 14, and Catherine had at that stage developed an 8-month course to establish accreditation, inclusivity accreditation for LGBTI services. And she got a grant to invite people from all over Australia to join in the course and take the ideas back to their own states and territories, which is very typical of Catherine. She's a maestro of spreading outness. It's what she does. So and I think that this Gen K is absolutely in the same spirit. So having worked with LGBTI elders' rights, I became way too familiar with all the issues around stigma and marginalisation and the emotionally crippling and corrosive effects of people on the receiving end of that. But it also, over the years, it dawned on me that the negative effects weren't just confined to the victims, for want of a better word, but were much more widespread. And in fact, those attitudes impoverished the whole community. We were all poorer as a result. And that there were all these wonderful, creative, talented people who were effectively outcast and could never be their whole selves. And so we were missing out. We were all missing out on the richness of diversity and diverse perspectives. So there's really plenty of parallels with that and ageism. It's the same story. So anyway, when Catherine first approached me with the idea about Gen K, I didn't need any convincing about the ageism side of it and the intergenerational side of it. We live in a very siloed society. That's normal. We consider it normal, so much so that we very rarely challenge it, in fact. But I did know that there was a real appetite for intergenerational projects. I had that experience myself. And I knew that we were all enriched when we had intergenerational or diverse age connections. So, there was very much a sense of, yes, we're ready for this. However, to be honest, as Catherine said, I was underwhelmed by the acts of kindness integration, I guess, in the project. And I really was grappling with the idea of whether, as the small acts of kindness, there's something that would be that simple could be meaningful, and would it be good enough? However, as we kind of spent, I don't quite even know how long, wrangling all the early drafts and then watching the pilots emerge, I certainly became pretty convinced of the merits and the strength of that combined approach. It demonstrates that with the kindness outcomes, when they're carefully targeted, I mean, there is some controls in here, that they are meaningful to the recipient, both in the immediate and also sort of unseen futures as well, because what starts an improvement in somebody's life momentarily, how that can carry forward. And that also the creative act of developing that act of kindness, that joint enterprise between the younger person and the older person, that in itself sets a sort of template for the participants' future actions and ways of thinking, as well as sort of throwing together the diverse perspectives of people coming from different walks of life. And in all, it has a sort of habituating effect, that people learn a process that not only helps address ageism internally, but externally as well. So it's really a very rich mixture. I think that the Gen K project can be really, I think Catherine uses the words transformative, and there's be a hard, really, I think that's a really good word to use. It sounds a bit hyperbole, but it is. It is not only on the course, the participants, but also the course leaders and, of course, the kindness recipients, and that it can have this continual sort of ripple out effects. So we learn about ageism. It's a very pervasive thing, so much so that we don't normally see it. So people are actually taught don't know whether taught is quite the right word, but it's sort of revealed through the course how widespread it is, and people pick up on noticing it, and then what they can do to overcome it, which is it's really quite liberating, because you're being oppressed by something you don't even half the time realize it's there. And when you meld that together with the power of the kindness activities, it's potentially quite a potent brew, I think. If we can normalize age positivity and kindness orientation as a way of being, I think we're really onto a winner with this.
Thanks, June.
So thank you. It's also a very joyous experience. And as somebody wiser than me once said, there has to be dancing for the revolution or I'm not coming. So thank you all for coming. And I hope everybody jumps on board and enjoys the ride. Thank you.
Thanks, June. And now, Yumi, over to you, Yumi Lee, the CEO of the Older Women's Network of New South Wales.
Thank you. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the Darug country where I'm zooming from, and I pay my respects to elders past and present, and I extend my respect to all First Nations people on this Zoom today. I'm really, really very happy to be sharing with you the reasons why the Older Women's Network New South Wales decided to take part in the pilot project for Gen K last year. Some of you may know that we already work very closely with the amazing Catherine on other projects, and most recently on the campaign to end sexual assault of older women. So as an organization which focuses on empowering older women as we age and also changing the status quo to bring about a world where older women are respected and included in decision making so they can age in dignity, we do a lot of campaigning and lobbying of decision makers on issues like homelessness and violence against women. We go to a lot of meetings, and all of this work is important, but what's missing, the missing link, is what the Gen K project addresses, and that is it's the creation of a community which listens, which builds empathy, and which encourages kindness. So this is what attracted us to take part in the pilot project. The strength of the Gen K project is that it encourages intergenerational exchange. So, we all live in this world where the young are often pitted against the old, but each generation we have something to give to each other. And the way this project is structured, through the questions that it asks its participants to reflect on, it actually encourages listening and recognizing that each generation has something valuable to offer, regardless of their age. And you'll hear that when you listen to Norma and Jamie later. So, as mentioned, the tools of this project really helps the participants to understand that kindness is not just about being nice to people, it's about showing empathy, compassion, and understanding, which comes about when all the younger and older participants, when they work together towards a common goal. And it's about being aware of the struggles that other people are facing, and doing what we can to help them. Because as Catherine mentioned, what we want is changing the world. And changing the world requires not just decision makers to change policies and bring down a good budget, but also for people in the community to care for one another. And that's why we will be doing everything we can to continue running Gen K workshops into the future, because we need a kinder Australia, a kinder world, and older people, including older women, who are often seen as less valuable, frail, and less capable on one side. And then on the other side, we have younger people who are viewed as less responsible and disrespectful. All these stereotypes are harmful, and what will really help to combat all these ageist stereotypes is kindness, where we learn how to listen, to value and respect each other. And so when we show kindness to someone, we find that we're not only helping them, but we're also inspiring them to be kind to others. As Catherine has set up this kindness pandemic Facebook, what we want to see is this epidemic of kindness, which spreads better understanding and empathy for one another. So in a world we live in that's divided by differences in beliefs, cultures, and values, kindness is something that can really unite us. It's a universal language. It transcends all boundaries, and we can all appreciate it regardless of our backgrounds or circumstances. So I really commend Gen K as a project to you. It's fantastic, and it enables us to work together to create a kinder and more compassionate world. So we thank Catherine and the team for this wonderful opportunity to be part of it. So now I'd like to introduce you to Katie Kavanagh, our fabulous coordinator of Bankstown Wellness Centre, who facilitated the Gen K workshop together with Shivani, to tell you what it was like to do the project. Over to you, Katie.
Thank you very much, Yumi, and hello everybody. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm zooming in from Gadigal land, and it's really wonderful to be here to celebrate the launch of the Centre for Intergenerational Power. Last year, I had the great pleasure of working with Catherine Barrett and Celebrate Aging to deliver their pilot series of intergenerational kindness workshops to a group of very open-hearted women. We matched women who were over 60 with women who were in their early 20s. And during our first session, none of us really knew what we were in for. I was nervous, but the workshops are so well structured and resourced. There's a great mix of activities, discussion, learning, interaction, and creativity. So in that first workshop, many of our older women didn't really feel like they experience ageism in their lives. But by the end, they were coming in and noting comments like, "Aren't you good for your age?" or "I can't believe you're that old." So it was really informative and a slow process to highlight all those things that, do go unseen. But once they're seen, you can't unsee them, which is the good thing. So I'm really proud about what we did in our time together. Our acts of kindness ideas started off on a grand scale, and then they came back to more doable acts like visiting the local cafe and leaving cards for essential service workers who worked in the hospital nearby. They were thrilled to be given a free coffee and a thank you card for the hard work they've been doing. So now I'd like to hand over to Norma, who was one of the participants in our workshops, and she's going to share her experience with you.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, Norma.
You can hear me. Oh, okay. Yeah, I was invited to do this generational workshop by, I'm sorry, I don't know. I think this might be the Cadigal land. And I give my respects to those who have come before, present, and will come in the future. So I was invited to come to this generational workshop by Katie, my manager at Bankstown Wellness Centre. And I did not have a clue what it was about. I didn't know how we would do this kindness thing. What would that entail? How would we go about it, and what did it mean? But we got to know each other, and as Katie said, we were given little tasks to do. Over the few weeks that we came, we did some pasting and talking about things that we might have done. And I was lucky to be paired with a beautiful young woman, Jamie, who was at university at the time. And we were given, I think this was our goal, was to do something kind for someone. And as Katie said, maybe getting a coffee for somebody or giving a card to these workers that were working through the COVID. I belong to a 12-step fellowship, and I was aware that some of the younger people perhaps were having difficulties, and one young man in particular was very, very depressed. And I asked Jamie if she would mind if we would probably write nice words to him and do a special card, which Jamie designed the card and I did the envelope, I think, and we each wrote words to help this young man who Jamie had never seen and I had only briefly met at a meeting, maybe on 2 or 3 occasions, but from what I could glean from his sharing at meetings, that he was having real difficulties and was very depressed. So what entailed was we did this card together and we decorated this card, and Jamie wrote some words from a university aspect of being a young person and what she thought Sam might like to hear, because she'd never met him. Neither of us knew what job he had done or what he was up to in life. Just it was a young man that had difficulty with drugs and alcohol and had decided to change his life, but in this change was finding difficulty with this aspect of this new life. So Jamie wrote words that she thought might help him, and I wrote words on the other side of the card which I thought might help him, and we decorated this card. And I was the one that was given the job of waiting till I met this young man again at a meeting, because we've got meetings all over Sydney. And when I saw him, I just said, "Oh, I'd like to give you this card, Sam, and have a look at it and just think about what we've written in this card for you, my young friend and myself." So Sam took this card, I believe. He took the card, thank you. And so that was at our lunchtime meeting. That night, he took the card to a 12-step meeting and he was asked to share. And he took that card up to the front of the room and he was so impressed with what we had written to him, and he shared it with all who were in the room, with maybe 30, 40 people. And he was just overawed that we had taken the time to write him this lovely card. Since then, people came to me at other meetings and said to me, "How do you join these kindness workshops? How do you get into it?" And I just said, well, the card that was given to Sam, perhaps you could write a card and nice words to someone that you think maybe is having a bit of a struggle. So in my fellowship that has been happening, and people will say, "Wow, I've got a card from such and such and such and such, and I'm so happy to get this card." And as for Sam, who was struggling and didn't work, wasn't doing TAFE, wasn't doing anything, he's gone to TAFE now and is studying and has also got a job and has become secretary of a meeting. That means he buys the tea, coffee, biscuits, sets the chairs up, has the keys, and opens up the meeting for everybody to come in. So he has come a long, long way in the past 9 months since we gave him this card. He's like a new person. So whether it was a card, but it seems to be mixing with everybody in the fellowship now. And that's what I'd like to say. I think it's been a terrific bonus for my fellowship that people are joining in and expressing a wish to do something similar. So that I'll stop now and let somebody else have a turn. And thank you, Jamie, for being my partner. She was fantastic.
Thanks, Norma. That was really incredibly powerful. And Sarah's now going to play a message from Jamie, who couldn't be here today.
Hi everyone, my name is Jamie, and last year I participated in the Generation Kindness workshop held at OWN New South Wales in Newtown. It was at this workshop that I learnt of the issue of ageism for the very first time. I was also very surprised to learn that loneliness is such a common experience among women in the community. These conversations on ageism and loneliness in particular led us as a group to draw out acts of kindness that we could do for other people in the community. I was very surprised to learn that an act of kindness can be a very simple thing. Going into this workshop, I thought that I would struggle to find something that I could do for someone in the community, especially knowing that I wouldn't know them personally. However, our group discussions taught me that an act of kindness can be as simple as a hug or, a heartfelt message to someone, or, a how are you text during, a week. I was lucky enough to partner with Norma at the workshop, who knew someone at her AA meetings, a young man who was celebrating 40 days sobriety at the time. And although I didn't know him and, had never met him, we both ended up writing a personal message to him in this card. Although I already loved to write cards for people, I felt even more inspired to write to people that I didn't know personally. This workshop not only taught me a lot about issues in the community, but also taught me a lot about myself. I am generally very shy, and I was shy going into this workshop, especially when I get anxious, meeting new people. But each week and each time we had the workshop, I found myself looking forward to seeing these women, and it was really the highlight of my week.
Thanks, Jamie. That's so incredibly powerful, this idea that we can combat ageism and build a better world in ways that it becomes the highlight of someone's week is incredibly powerful. So just to finish, what we will be sending to you next week is a link to the Gen K Leaders Network. And that Leaders Network, there is a workshop facilitators kit that has everything that you need to facilitate the workshops. There's the prep staff, which is risk management, a summary of the evidence, video guidance materials, recruitment, the flyers, information sheets and consent forms, step-by-step activities for 4 workshops, strategies for dissemination, for engaging the community, and evaluation, everything from the simple asking participants for feedback to measuring pre and post knowledge, attitudes and behaviours, and a program logic model, which is just I think perhaps a fancy way of a fancy action plan that tells you what you need to do to get a particular outcome and what outcomes you can expect. Thanks, Sarah. The Leadership Network will also have coaching and support. So there'll be online facilitated network meetings 3 times a year for people who are facilitating the GenK workshop. So you can get on to those online sessions and talk to other people, and I'll be facilitating information in those as well too, and a consultation with me as well too if people want to talk about planning their project. And what we will be launching as well too next week is the GenK library. So Norma and Jamie's story has been pulled into a book, a very, very, very short 3-minute read book that will go up in the library. So there are these records of these beautiful acts of kindness that older and younger people are doing together to look at changing the world one act of kindness at a time. Thanks, Sarah. And I think to finish, we thought really long and hard about sharing this slide with you and decided it was incredibly important. We have worked so incredibly hard over the last 2 years. All the members of the Kindness Pandemic team, the Celebrate Ageing team, Norma and Jamie, the Older Women's Network of New South Wales, to Yumi and Katie, to everybody who brought this together to try and come up with something that, as Jamie says, people look forward to being part of and that can create real change in the world. So please keep an eye out in your emails next week for the link to the web pages. We're almost done and we'll be sharing that with you next week. So thank you all for being here and take care out there.